Today, we'll be picking back up off of practice test 1, College Board, section 2, where we finished off last Thursday. I'm Patrick Spano, my buddy Alex Torres. I'll let you start us off.
All right, so we were in test 1, section 2. This is the test that you can get for free off the College Board website. And, ideally, you'd probably, if you're watching this after the fact, you're going to want to pause, try a question, see what answer you get, and then look at our answer. So let's go ahead. We, in a recent video, got up to question 20, and now we're on question 21. And so, you always want to start early and read fast. Our phrase that we use is to read fast and carelessly. Isn't that just such a nice thing to have a tutor telling you, I want you to be more careless? Enjoy that moment, because it doesn't happen often enough. But the idea with reading is when you're reading big blocks and getting the overall idea, that's much more valuable to you than the tiny details. But then when you get into a specific situation, that's where you look at the tiny details. But we don't want to waste our information on that until we need to do it. So just reading through fast. Box's research is important because the fires of 2012 may not be a one-time phenomenon. According to scientists, the Arctic temperatures are making the latitudes greener and more fire-prone. The pattern Box observed in 2012 may repeat itself again. Okay, so yeah, we do go word for word as we get to the thing that we're looking at. And it has to occur to you that to repeat yourself again is repetitiveness. And on the SAT, very continually, we're up against wordiness and repetitiveness versus conciseness. And that's our battle. And another way to identify this question type is when one answer choice is way shorter than the others. That's when you want to be looking out for this thing. So if you're going to add extra words, it should be because they give you some tremendous value that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And I don't see that in any of the answer choices. So we'll just kind of go with B and then read it out loud once to make sure it works. The pattern Box observed in 2012 may repeat itself with harmful effects on the Arctic ecosystem. So it's more concise. It doesn't lose anything valuable. Alrighty. So now we're going over to question 22. 22 is giving us a question about sentence location. And our one-liner for sentence location is to look within and imagine. So just a quick little explanation if you haven't heard this from us before. The idea of look within and imagine means that we're going to the opposite of what any logical person would normally do. When they're encountering a question like this, most people would just quickly read sentence 4 and then quickly look to see where it goes. And that's logical and that makes sense. But if you do that, you're missing out on some extra information you're going to get from sentence 4 if you spend just an extra moment on it. So this is the idea of looking within. We want you to kind of dwell on sentence 4, just an extra moment, and you're going to notice amazing stuff. And then from that amazing stuff, you can imagine what would have come before and after. So Box is currently organizing an expedition to gather this crucial information. So notice that they're referring back to something. They're referring back to this crucial information that they previously defined. So based on what we're seeing, we can imagine that before they just mentioned some crucial information. The thing to notice if you're watching this is that we haven't at all looked throughout the passage. We don't, just like we don't want to look at the answer choices sometimes, in this situation, we don't want to look at the passage yet until we've really digested. So it's not always about going fast. It's about where to invest that valuable time. And this is where you want to invest it, things like this, the processing. So Box is organizing an expedition to gather this crucial information. What would we imagine would come after it? So here we have before, here we have after. What would come after would be something about the expedition, right? He had this many dogs and this much spare water and food or whatever. So now that we've digested it by looking within and imagining, we can go ahead and look around and see where it would fit. So what location seems to generally fit with this, Patrick? What do you think?
I'm just going to take a quick look, scan through.
Little trick of the trade, I always keep a little answer key off to the side so that I don't have to spend too much time thinking and wasting time in these videos. So after sentence 1, Box's research is important because the fires of 2012 may not be a one-time phenomenon, so I don't see any crucial information there. According to scientists, rising Arctic temperatures are making northern latitudes greener and more fire prone. Still not seeing any like data or information. The pattern may repeat itself with harmful effects in the Arctic ecosystem. So it's a detail, but it's not like information. It's not like a file, right? The next step for Box and his team is to travel to Greenland, perform direct sampling of the ice in order to determine just how much soot is contributing to the melting of the ice sheet. So there they just reference some specific information that we're going to be hunting for.
Correct. And just to
how
reiterate,
much soot.
the first 3 sentences, when you read them, they all seem to be talking about the same thing, which was just really the pattern he observed. As you said, there was no information or there was no data or anything that was really mentioned. So that's what I would say for the first 3, just seem to be talking about the same thing. And then obviously once you get into sentence 5, we get more specific into the details or the data that they might be looking for, as you mentioned.
Very good. Very good. I mean, it's all information, right? But now that we've highlighted this pink part, we can see the difference. It's like an experimental type of information or a notation of something, like when you're doing an experiment or research. So that's the information. And we said that after might be information about the expedition. Members of the public will be able to track the progress and fund the expedition. So there is some information about the expedition. So for 22, we're going to say D after sentence 5. And, you know, for people just joining us, if we're highlighting something in yellow, it's because we want you to memorize it. And we've been doing this for a while, and we're some of the more some of the more specialized SAT and ACT tutors in the world. So if we're telling you if there's something you need to remember to do better on these tests, definitely take that to heart. We're helping you quite a bit with this free information. So looking at number 23, we want to read fast and gain some momentum. So we want to read fast and carelessly right into 23. Okay. And when I left my office as a website developer for a position that allowed me to work from home, I thought I had it made. I traded in, and notice we're never reading word for word unless we're at that point where we need that kind of depth. I traded in suits and dress suits for slippers, my early morning bag lunch for a midday trip to the refrigerator. The novelty of this, now I'm slowing down, the novelty of this comfortable work from home life, however, soon got worn off quickly. So what am I noticing here as I glance around? We've got one answer choice that is way shorter than the others, and that should be a cue once again to the wordiness and repetitiveness versus conciseness. So the trick with this one is not how to handle a question about this, because when we're looking to not be repetitive, then we want to not be repetitive, and we want to be concise, we'll pick the shortest one. That's easy. It's identifying that this is what the question is about. So you get a lot of people who are wondering, whether there's some grammar they should be looking at here because they didn't yet notice that it's about wordiness versus conciseness. So I'm not seeing anything necessary in the other ones. And I am seeing repetitiveness. Where's the repetitiveness in choice A, Patrick?
Well, it says soon got worn off quickly. I also just think that it's too wordy. I just think that it sounds awkward also. And then for B and C, I would just say the word promptly. We don't need that because we have the word quickly again. But I think A really just sounds awkward, not to mention it has soon.
Yeah, it sounds awkward.
The same as promptly, correct.
And yeah, as soon and quickly, promptly and quickly. So they're very specifically. So when you see repetitiveness, sometimes one answer choice will repeat one aspect of what they said before, and another answer choice will repeat another thing that they said before. So, you kind of know that that's what's going on just because we've told you so. And so you kind of have that heads up, and then you can look around and see if they mentioned each of these things that are put into each of the answer choices. So going to 24, having become frustrated trying to solve difficult problems, no colleagues were nearby to share ideas. This is a really critical one, critical in the sense that it might be a little harder to notice than some of the other things, but okay, first of all, a little background. What's a modifier? And to know what a modifier is, you need to know what a clause is. A clause has a subject and a verb. So John went to the mall is always the clause that I mentioned, right? The independent versus dependent. John went to the mall has a subject and a verb, and it can sound like its own sentence. To make it dependent, you put it what we refer to as an annoying word in the front. And in a previous lesson, we discussed our English 101, which explains this in detail. But if the independent is John went to the mall, The dependent would be since John went to the mall, because John went to the mall, after John went to the mall, or the reason why John went to the mall. But those are all clauses. Independent versus dependent, they're clauses because they have a subject and a verb. A modifier is missing the subject, the verb, or both. And once again, if you want more information on that, we're actually going to chop up one of our recent videos and isolate the English 101 part of it and put that online, because it's one of the most helpful things to help students to know this stuff better. But okay, so we're firm on what's a modifier and we're firm on what's a clause. Clause has a subject, the verb, or both. Clause has a subject and a verb. Modifier is missing the subject, the verb, or both. Why are we talking about this right now? Because there's a special type of scenario where a sentence starts with a modifier that's missing the subject. So it creates a whole lot of suspense. When that happens, the subject must lead the second part of the sentence. So, for instance, having made it to the playoffs nearly every year of his career and being a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame, comma, I just gave you a lot of information about LeBron James. So now I need to say, LeBron James visited my school today, or LeBron James is Jimmy's favorite player, you know? So we're creating so much suspense by not mentioning the subject in the first part of the sentence that it creates this avalanche where the subject has to follow the second part. So looking at our sentence that we're dealing with here, having become frustrated trying to solve different problems. So a very kind of long-winded explanation of how someone feels without mentioning the actual person. So it creates that suspense that I was just mentioning. And so now we need to mention the subject first. So which answer choice mentions the subject as the first part of the second part of the sentence?
D.
Choice D. I is the one who was doing all this stuff. So who was becoming frustrated trying to solve different problems? The narrator was, I. So that's the only choice that does that. And 24 is going to be D there. Okay, going on to number 25 now. It was during this time that I read an article into. So now we're talking about idioms. You don't have to be a master of idioms, but you have to realize that a question is about idioms. So you can kind of ask yourself, what would be said in that situation? So idioms are just words that just kind of naturally go together. So I read an article. What would we say in our own words without looking at the answer choices? I would say I read an article on this, right? And of course, they're not going to give us that one because that's too obvious. So in a lot of these idioms where there's the obvious word that would work, that's the one that won't be given to you as an answer choice. But by processing it that way, you'll be a lot stronger. So I read an article into co-working spaces. I read an article about co-working spaces. I read an article upon, or I read an article for. So what's our answer here?
B. About.
We read an article about. So that's a classic idiom. And just by realizing that it's about an idiom, we'll avoid any kind of catastrophic mistake that would come when we're sort of interpreting a question in terms of something other than what the question was about. Okay, so the article published by Forbes magazine explained that co-working spaces are designated locations that for a fee individuals can use to conduct their work. They're usually stocked with standard office equipment such as photocopiers, printers, and fax machines. So just looking at it on our own, it sounds like a nice little list. They're stocked with standard office equipment, comma, such as. Now, why would a colon not work here is essentially what we need to tell students. And the rule for the colon is that the first part is an independent clause. So it has to be able to be its own sentence. And the second part is anything, independent, dependent, or modifier, that describes the first part. So looking through some of the answer choices and judging, should a colon go here? The easiest thing you can do is just ask yourself, for any of the possible colons that they're giving me, would the first part be an independent clause? So which answer choices can we narrow out based on that?
B, B, and C. Because what comes before those colons?
So equipment such as, that's just not, if you read it on its own, the part leading into that, it's not a sentence. And you said A for the other one? No.
Oh, I said
Just
B
B
and
and
C.
C. B and
and
C.
C.
Okay. And then the question is why we don't want a comma right here. What would you say to that?
So spaces are usually stocked with standard office equipment, comma, such as. So here, why do we not want a comma after the such as? Well, I know some people just teach it as a rule. You can't have it afterwards. What would you say from the
It's a little bit of
more grammatical
a
point of view?
slippery one there. Like, why do we not want a comma? You know, one thing we teach is that there's 6 reasons for a comma. So if you're in any of these hairier situations where you're trying to determine whether to keep or delete a comma, that you can kind of see both sides of it, then you want to have this set of rules memorized: 6 reasons for a comma. Number 1, if you have a dependent clause followed by an independent clause, and we won't go into too much detail right now on these. Number 2, if you have a modifier, if you can say that what I'm separating apart is a modifier, then I want a comma. If you have 2 independent clauses, it's either a semicolon or a comma conjunction. If you're setting up a quotation, so this is what he said, quote, and I quote. If you have a list, so a list is coming later in this, but we don't have the list yet. And last but not least, a description following a description. So he went into the dark, gloomy house, or he loved her long, flowing hair. So if I'm trying to determine in a testing situation where I'm highly stressed out anyway, whether to keep or delete a comma, I'm just going to ask myself, does it fit into any of those? And I think we can clearly say it doesn't. You agree?
Correct. It doesn't.
Okay. So, alrighty. So going into 27 now. It was stocked with photocopiers, printers, and fax machines. In these locations, however, the spaces include. So we're talking about transition words for number 27. And for transition words, you want to invent your own word there. What that does is it forces you to read it in a way that sometimes we feel like we are, but we're really not, because we're balancing so many competing interests when we do a test like this. So what kind of transition would you have maybe wanted in sort of this blue space right here?
I would have said maybe furthermore to begin the sentence, the word furthermore.
So they're stocked with photocopiers, printers, and fax machines. Furthermore, which kind of means in addition. In addition, they often include small meeting areas. So, and then that's exactly what happens sometimes when you do it in your own words. You end up with the answer. So in addition to equipment, they also have this. And if there was something else that meant in addition, it would be a tough decision to make, right? But that kind of goes exactly with what we invented on our own there. And okay, so looking at number 28 now, the writer is considering deleting the underlined sentence. So our one-liner for adding and deleting. And this is very critical because we need a little clue on what we should be looking at here, is that it's paragraph based. It's based on the main idea of the paragraph. So this is one of these areas where even though we're in a time crunch a lot of the time, we have to slow down, or else there's just almost zero chance of getting a right answer. You want to get the main idea of the paragraph and announce that to yourself. So what's kind of the main idea of this paragraph?
I would just say basic description of what co-working spaces are and what equipment they have, how they're furnished.
Yeah, it's like defining them in terms of like what they have, right? So the cost of launching a new co-working business is estimated to be $58,000. Does that go with the definition of what a co-working space is?
It doesn't really tie into the same details they were going over.
Yeah, the cost is unrelated to just saying what one is. So should it be kept or deleted? We're going to say it should be deleted because it blurs the paragraph's main focus with a loosely related detail. I like it because it repeats information that has been provided in an earlier paragraph. If you want to split hairs, you can kind of go back and see if that was mentioned, but it wasn't. So we're going to go with C on number 28. So going to number 29 now. The writer wants to add specific information that supports the main topic of the paragraph. So they're giving us an excuse for the main idea. And this is one of the most frequent questions you're going to see in section 2. It's just a reason for the question to ask us what was the main idea. And you can't shortchange that process because, like we said, it's one of the most common questions. So if you're getting them wrong. You're getting a lot of questions wrong there. You want to announce that main idea to yourself. So what is the main idea of the paragraph?
Well, I just kind of glanced at it briefly. It seems to be the collaborative efforts, I guess you could say, of the people that work in a co-working space.
Yeah, they're melting pots of creativity. The most valuable resources are the people. So it's the idea of the people coming together. So now that, okay, so we're announcing it. It's the idea of people coming together. You definitely want to, students in general want to build their confidence on answering questions in their own words. If I were just beginning in all this, I would say, I don't want to answer in my own words. There are probably many different ways to do that. And how do I know that my way is going to be good? But the lesson really is that in a lot of situations, there's one and only one sort of main idea. And we can talk at length about how to arrive at that. But you want to build your confidence in just going out on your own and saying, this is what it is. And the answer choices come to me and not the other way around. So we want to add specific information that supports that main idea. So perceived effect of co-working on business skills. And so then if we're talking about people coming together, I guess that's kind of relating to, let's see what question they're asking us. We need to complete the sentence with relevant and accurate information. So this is a really interesting question because right here they're saying we're going to support the main topic. And then they're saying that we want relevant and accurate information. So sometimes you don't know in which vein they're asking. But which do you see off the top of the bat, off the bat, any of these that kind of jive with the idea of people coming together? So A says,
I would say B looks 71% of respondents indicated that using co-working space increased their creativity. I'm trying to
so
look
people
back
are coming together and it
before.
makes them better than they would independently be. I like it. They credited co-working spaces with their ideas relating to business. Almost as good as creativity, right? And their ability to focus on their work improved. So I would definitely favor B or C in terms of like the idea of coming together is going to kind of, let's see. Now it makes me kind of want to look back and see, did I see anything? Actually, creativity is the other thing that maybe we glossed over in the beginning, right? So if creativity is the focus, then that's going to want to take us more to answer choice B. And B is the right answer here. So we are reiterating the main idea. And we just talked about the gamble involved in answering in your own words and what happens if I'm wrong. And we just saw right now that that's not so bad, because even if in the off case, our just assumption is just a little different than what the SAT wanted, we're still in this position of power where we could say, you know what, let me take one more look and wait a minute, that does actually match up. So we processed it and that kind of enabled us to do that.
And then also, or just to go back, sorry, on why
Yep.
C, I think also could be wrong, because it's saying that respondents credited co-working spaces with giving them 74% of their ideas relating to business. However, the graph, the chart, is more just the impact, the increase on your ideas relating to business. It's not necessarily saying that they received 74% of their ideas from the co-working spaces. It's saying that they had a positive impact, an increase of 74%. So maybe we're kind of splitting hairs there, but maybe
No,
just
no.
a little nuanced.
That's huge. That's
Difference.
really, really big and really valuable because, you know, particularly on the reading section, sometimes it looks like there's 3 right answers, but when you take a deep breath and look away and just reset yourself, you'll notice tiny little wordings like that. You know, remember, the job of the writers of these tests is to make the wrong answers wrong because they don't want to be taken to court after the fact and sued either. So it's your job to do the best you can on this test. It's their job to give you situations where only one answer is right. And you'll see a lot of those kinds of wordings that will help to discount a wrong answer choice. So now going into number 30, they're actually the people whom use them. So let's just kind of talk about the differences between who and whom, they and them, we versus us, she versus her, and there are a lot of these, and it goes on, he versus him. The formal way to understand this is that The words in the blue column here are for the subject of the sentence, and the words in the pink column are not. But when you're in a rush, you kind of want to say to yourself, these are the words that should go before a verb, and these are the words that are not going to be before a verb. So an example of that would be just throwing around a football. So who threw the football to whom? Who threw it? So that'll be our verb. Who threw the football to whom? They threw it to them. We threw it to us. She threw it to her. He threw it to him. They all sound good. So when you're judging who versus whom, just look to see if there's a verb. So people who use them, these are people who are using. So they are before a verb. And so it has to be C or D. And then just a singular versus plural. We're talking about plural people who use something. So 30 is going to be choice D. Okay.
I'm just gonna hop off. I'll let you continue, but I'll catch you guys tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. And okay, so thanks, Patrick. And we'll go ahead and try to get to the end of this section right now for people who are using these tips in the short term and can really use those answers. Have a good one, Patrick. So looking at number 31, the writer wants to add the following sentence to the paragraph. So what's the best placement for this sentence? We're talking about sentence location, and we talked about one of these a moment ago. We want to look within and imagine. So looking within this sentence, so we're taking an extra moment just to focus on the sentence in question. So after filling out a registration form and taking a quick tour of the facility, I took a seat at the table and got right to work on my laptop. So just looking within this sentence, knowing that it's about co-working spaces and it's about a person who kind of tested it out for him or herself, we know that this is the beginning of the process. So this is a really easy one to kind of look within and imagine, because I might be arriving to the co-working space, and then I might fill out the registration form, and then I might go ahead and get to work in a co-working space. So this is a very clear sort of step in that process for number 31. So looking through, I decided to try using a co-working space. So we're thinking about trying it. We chose a facility that did something. So far we're not at the registration form part of the process. Throughout the morning, more people appeared. So, well, now we're at the co-working space because they're describing what it's like at that space. So the idea of filling out the registration form has to be after sentence 2 and before sentence 3. So number 31 is going to be C for cat. So in number 32, we're talking about the definitions for the colon, semicolon, and long dash. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring those in from a previous lesson. Okay, so I liked the experience so much that I now go to the co-working space a few times a week. Over time, I've gotten to know several of my co-working colleagues. So does this fit the definition of where to use a colon? You can see in blue here that the colon definition says that the first part is an independent clause and the second part is anything that describes the first part. So I've gotten to know several of my co-working colleagues. This little piece right here is a modifier, so we ignore that in this conversation. So that is an independent clause in pink. The second part is going to describe the colleagues. If it does, then the colon works. So another website developer, a graphic designer, a freelance writer, and mobile app coders. So the second part is indeed describing the first part. So we can go ahead and say A. The semicolon would be for 2 independent clauses. And the part that I underlined in purple here is not an independent clause, so that doesn't work. You always want to judge your special punctuation first because it will kind of either narrow out and make the question easier, or it'll hit the nail right on the head. So here, this is such a perfect situation for a colon that we can just kind of pick it and move on. So looking at number 33, even those of us who work in disparate fields are able to share advice and help each other brainstorm. So this is our question on word choice, where you have 4 words that essentially mean the same thing, and one of them is more appropriate. 90% of the time, at least, it comes down to the definition of the word. sometimes it comes down to how formal the SAT generally favors answer choices that are very formal. So even those of us who work in disparate fields are able to share advice and help each other brainstorm, give wisdom in terms of the definition of each word. So we all know what advice is. Wisdom is very profound, and just sitting around the workplace, tinkering with things, it doesn't really fit. It's too profound. Proclaim our opinions. If I'm proclaiming something, I'm thinking of like taking a political stance or making a speech or something with a lot of gravity. So that's why I don't like this. And to opine, um, to give your opinion. Once again, I might kind of say that that's political. I mean, what a strange word there, right? But that just makes me think of someone who's standing on top of a soapbox and saying, I declare, I opine this. So that's kind of my problem with D. So now for 33, we'll just say A. You know, if you think of people at a workplace, they are going to just kind of share advice with one another, help each other brainstorm. You know, and I might see this as kind of an exception to the rule, because we say with word choice that we want the definition or we want it to be very formal. But one thing that I'm kind of noticing here is that helping each other brainstorm is actually kind of casual, and sharing advice is actually kind of casual as well. So generally, we've noticed that the SAT likes the more formal ones, but here we're kind of seeing that both of the things that, you know, the one that was already there and the one that we're picking to match it, they're both kind of equally casual. So at least they match each other, which is the most important part there for number 33. So let's go to number 34. 34 is asking us about transition words. Transition words. And for transition words, you want to invent your own. Like we always say, that forces us to read it in a more profound way. And so just kind of speed reading into all of this. Long viewed by many as a stereotypical useless major, philosophy is now being seen by students and prospective employers as, in fact, a very useful and practical major, offering students a host of transferable skills with relevance to the modern workplace. Philosophy is the study of meaning and the values underlying thought and behavior, but the discipline encourages students to analyze complex material. So we have kind of our thesis statement here, where we're seeing that philosophy is starting to be seen as useful in today's world, which I maybe disagree with, but philosophy is being seen as useful in today's world. Now, then they go into the blue part. What is philosophy? So if I were doing it in my own words, I would say, here's the definition. Like, in other words, they don't transition well because we're going from the thesis statement that philosophy is actually useful, and we're taking a step back and saying, okay, in order to understand this better. So maybe in my own words, I would have said, in order to understand this better. But definitely not a contrast. We're not getting an example. And nevertheless means even though. So, you know, he smelled bad. Nevertheless, we invited him to our party, right? So A will fit a little bit better. So once again, in my own words, I would have said, here's the definition, or I would have said like something like taking a step back, you know, to define what philosophy is. And so they, you know, those definitions in our own words contrast a lot more with B, C, and D than they do with A. So looking at 35 now. So we gave the definition in the beginning, or we gave the thesis of what was going to be argued in the beginning, right here, right? So that's our thesis statement. Philosophy is useful. Then we have the definition of philosophy. What is it? In broad terms, philosophy is the study of meaning and values underlying thought and behavior. But then when we get to 35, more pragmatically, the discipline encourages students to analyze complex material. So if we look at the way the blue and maybe the green statements kind of interact with one another, philosophy in general is the study of this, but in particular, it does that. So in my own words, I would kind of want to just say in particular. But looking at the answer choices, they're all kind of doing the same thing. So this is kind of a sneaky question on wordiness versus conciseness. So do we want to be wordy and repetitive, or do we want to be concise? And of course, we always want to be concise unless there's something very valuable in the extra words. So the most concise answer choice is A, more pragmatically. So 36, because philosophy teaches students not what to think and how to think, the age-old discipline offers. So I might think of this as parallelism. We want to be parallel and consistent with the way we're speaking throughout the sentence or the paragraph. So because philosophy teaches students not what to think, but how to think, the discipline offers consistently useful tools. So it teaches and it offers. So choice B on number 36 goes consistently with that. Number 37, which choice effectively sets up the information that follows? That's our excuse for the main idea. They're saying set up what follows, but they may as well be asking what follows. So when you have the excuse for the main idea, what you want to do is you want to announce it to yourself. So let's take a quick look at what's coming. What is the information that follows? A survey concluded that only 18% of American colleges required at least one philosophy course. Between 1992 and 1996, more than 400 independent philosophy departments were eliminated. So for 37, we're seeing what it is that follows is that philosophy is kind of being taken out of the college environment. So let's go ahead and announce that it's being taken out. And let's go ahead and look at which answer choices. So philosophy students are receiving more job offers. That kind of goes in the other direction. That would say we'd want to have more philosophy in college. Choice B, because of the evidence, colleges have increased their offerings. Once again, going in the opposite direction, we're seeing in this area that philosophy is being taken out of college. Notwithstanding the attractiveness of this course of study, students have resisted majoring in philosophy. That at least goes a little. I might leave that for later. Despite its many utilitarian benefits, colleges have not always supported the study of philosophy. So colleges are not supporting. So now, if we're, in our own words, we said philosophy is being taken out, but by who? It's by colleges. So if I look at C and D, they're both in line with the idea that philosophy is being taken out, but it's the colleges who are taking out philosophy. They're removing philosophy from their departments. So between C and D, D has the colleges removing philosophy. So now going on to number 38. 38 is a transition. And let's see. We're transitioning, okay, within this red area here. And so just clean up the screen a little so we can see more clearly. So this is a confusing question. I've grappled with it with students before. Just kind of making it a little bigger for people who would have trouble seeing this type of screen. Okay, so the survey concluded that only 18% of colleges required one philosophy course. More than 400 independent philosophy departments were eliminated. So for transition words, we want to invent our own. It forces us to read it more deeply. And there is a little subtlety here because I can kind of understand where a lot of students would come from by saying that there's a therefore, because there's such agreement. You know, only 18% are requiring it, so few are requiring the philosophy. And then later it says it's being eliminated. Now, although it's really tempting to put a therefore in the middle between these two, it's not a cause and effect relationship. They're not eliminating it because they don't require it. It's kind of the relationship. This is not the word that I would put, but the relationship is a relationship of more of the same. Like these two things just fully agree with one another. So while it's tempting to say cause and effect, the first thing is not causing the second thing to happen. And so therefore we would say moreover or furthermore. Now, thus is also cause and effect. So A and B are both cause and effect words. You know, I hit my head, therefore I had a bump. I hit my head, thus I had a bump. And when you see two answer choices that are doing the same thing, that could be a little clue for you that maybe they're both wrong. So moreover is kind of a word that says in addition. That would be what we would use for moreover or furthermore. And in addition works great because you have fact A and then you have fact B, and they both agree with one another. So if I were putting a transition word, I would say, in addition to what I just said, now I'm going to say something else that also agrees with it. So going to number 39, when we're talking about effectively combining, this is one of our more in-depth one-liners. We want to read fast, looking for flow. Conciseness fits within that. We want good transition words or punctuation. So that's words like however or furthermore, or colons, semicolons, and long dashes. We want good word order. Occasionally, you see a wrong answer choice that has all the right words, but it's in an order that creates a bad emphasis. And last but not least, but by far the most important, we want to avoid restarting. So we don't want something to read like school is fun. It is my favorite place. We would rather have one idea than have something chopped into multiple ideas for no reason. So looking at number 39, studies have found that those students who major in philosophy often do better than students from other majors in both verbal reasoning and analytical ability. These results can be measured by. So you can kind of see the original one that we don't have the choice to keep is kind of an idea of restarting. So once again, when we're effectively combining, we want to look out for these four things. But looking at choice B, philosophy, students who major in philosophy do better than students from other majors in verbal and reasoning and analytical ability. And these results can be. So here are the results, and these results can be. Or looking at C, they do better in these subjects, and this can also be, is essentially what C is saying. And D is the easy one to get rid of because when is something that we would use in a special situation. Like this happens when that happens. It's being used. It's often used to tell us about simultaneous events, which is not what's happening. These things are simultaneous, but that's not what's being described. It's not like this only happens when this other thing happens. So we got rid of B and C because they both have an error of restarting. And A is the only one left. So let's just read it with A in place. Studies have found that those students who major in philosophy often do better than students from other majors in both verbal reasoning and analytical ability as measured by standardized test scores. So in other words, the standardized test scores verify this or corroborate this. So A is going to be the answer to 39. Now we're looking at number 40. On the graduate record examination, GRE, students intending to study philosophy in grad school have scored higher. Who are we talking about? We're talking about the students, plural, and those plural students have scored. So A is singular. One person scores, multiple people score. So C is singular. And I would say D just would sound terrible there. Students intending to study philosophy in graduate school scoring higher than students in all but 4 other majors. Another thing about D is that because ing and to-do words are not verbs, if you put D in place, the sentence is actually now missing a verb. Because the verb is the idea that they scored a certain way, or in B, that they have scored a certain way. So another important thing to mention about number 40. Number 40 involves students intending to study philosophy in graduate school. So this is what we refer to as a string of nouns joined by prepositions. So we have students, and what students? They are students who are intending, which intending is used as a noun there. And there are students who are intending. What are they intending? They're intending to study philosophy. And so we have the students are intending. What are they intending? They're intending to study. And where are they intending to study that? They're intending to study it in graduate school. So they're students who are, the R is kind of silent there. They're students who are intending to study in graduate school. So these things that I am highlighting here, sort of the silent R, the to, and the in, these are prepositional relationships. Prepositions are words that tell us the relationship between nouns. And so here we're talking about a string of nouns joined by prepositions. Now, once again, prepositions tell us the relationship between nouns, and the relationship is usually one of location. So prepositional words tend to be location words more frequently. But the rule is you want to judge singularity and plurality by the first noun in the string. So what's the first noun in the string? Students. So once we identified that, we can essentially read this as students have scored higher. And so the idea of the string of nouns joined by prepositions is the idea that you're able to focus on the word that does the determining and not focus so much on everything else. So the students have scored higher, and that's another reason why we lean toward choice B here. So now going over to number 41. These days, many students majoring in philosophy have no intention. So we're noticing that some of the answer choices here have apostrophes and some of them do not. So apostrophes are used for possessives. In real life, apostrophes are used for possessives or for abbreviations, but abbreviations are not quizzed on the SAT as much. So when you see an apostrophe, you want to ask yourself, is it possessive or is it not? So does something belong to the student here or here? Well, in choice D, it does. These days, many students majors in philosophy have no intention. So D is kind of using the apostrophe correctly. In choice A, there's nothing that belongs to the student in the way that they're saying it. So it's not the student's car, the student's book, the student's cell phone, nothing like that. So then A is out immediately. And D, even though it's using the apostrophe theoretically correctly, it's kind of changing the meaning in a bad way, because the students' majors are not the things that have no intention. It's the students who have no intention. So the semantics of D are off. The students' majors are not people. They're not able to have an intention to do anything. So now looking between B and C, students majoring in philosophy have no intention of becoming philosophers. That works. These days, many students major in philosophy. And then if this worked, I might say many students major in philosophy and have no intention. So if the word and were maybe here, then C would have kind of fit a little bit better. But just reading it out loud, B works. These days, many students majoring in philosophy have no intention of becoming philosophers. So that's number 41. Number 42. Okay, here we're considering adding the following sentence. So we're talking about adding and deleting. And our one-liner for adding and deleting is that that's always going to be paragraph based. It's always going to be based on just the main idea of the paragraph. So in this situation, you want to take an extra second to just ask yourself, what was the main idea of the paragraph? So the paragraph says, people majoring in philosophy have no intention of becoming philosophers. They're going to apply it to other disciplines, particularly law and business, benefit. But philosophy can be useful in engineering or any field requiring complex analytical skills. The idea that these skills are transferable across professions makes them beneficial to students. Because students can hold multiple jobs, studying philosophy allows them to be flexible and adaptable. High demand, advanced exam scores, and varied professional skills all argue for maintaining and enhancing philosophy courses and majors within academic institutions. So overall, the paragraph is saying that philosophy is very useful, and that's why colleges should include it as a major. They shouldn't get rid of it, right? So we're looking for the main idea. And we quickly gathered that it's the idea that the philosophy is useful and therefore colleges should include it as a major. So now we're going to judge the sentence that we were thinking of adding or deleting. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato wrote many of his works in the form of dialogues. I couldn't think of anything more unrelated to what we just ascertained as the main idea. So we're going to go ahead and say that we'll get rid of it. Sorry about that. Just lost my place for a moment. Hit the wrong button. Okay. So it's just totally irrelevant, right? So we're going to go ahead and stamp this as irrelevant. And so are we going to add it? No, heck no, we're not going to add it. Does it blur the paragraph's focus by introducing a new idea that's unexplained? Absolutely. Does it undermine the passage's claim? This little tidbit here, I've never seen it right. That doesn't mean that they won't throw us a curveball one day and make it right. But just know that the backstory is that this is used as almost a fluffy throwaway wrong answer choice to our knowledge, undermining the passage's claim about things. What would it mean to undermine the passage's claim about something? If someone said I robbed a bank, then the fact that I was on video at a party at that same time undermines the claim that I robbed the bank. So to undermine means to provide a single fact that single-handedly proves something wrong. And that's not what the little sentence about Plato writing dialogues does in this situation. So now we're going to look at number 43. Actually, okay, we've got kind of the disjointed paragraph here. So I just got to copy this and I'll paste it in the next part so that we can kind of see them right next to each other here. Okay, so for 43, that these skills are transferable across professions makes them especially beneficial to 21st century students. So what's going on number 43? Something about the style in which the tests enjoy writing, which I will refer to as the stylish deletion of a word. So 1 second while I reset something on my screen that froze. So right here, we're talking about, goodness gracious, are we having another message brought to you by Microsoft? Love-hate relationship with Microsoft, gotta say, because they make a lot of what I do possible, but their current version of OneNote freezes a lot. Okay, so we're talking about the stylish deletion of a word or words as a general style that these tests enjoy talking. So when they say that these skills are transferable, we just want to be really comfortable with that style. It was something more prominent on the older SAT, but it's still relevant today. What's really being said here is the fact that these skills are transferable across professions makes them beneficial. So our comfort level with how this is written and the fact that it's okay in the SAT world allows us to say that we're going to just go ahead and delete it because it's not needed in that sense. That these skills are transferable. Okay, so the fact that these skills are transferable across professions makes them especially beneficial to 21st century students. So why are we allowed to kind of read this as if the words were there? The idea of stylish deletion of a word is the idea that if we can understand the meaning without the words being there, like we just did, sort of seeing those invisible words, then it's considered okay. Really weird. It took me a long time to explain it because of how weird it is, but it is something to be familiar with when you're preparing for these tests. It's like getting to know a person. And this is one sort of idiosyncrasy about this person. So looking at number 44 now, last question in the section. Because today's students can expect to hold multiple jobs, some of which may not even exist yet during our lifetime, studying philosophy allows them to be flexible and adaptable. So who is our? It's just not really consistent because what they said before was they said we were talking about today's students. So when we're talking about today's students and then we're referring back to them later with a pronoun, today's students are plural, so their. is going to be the right way to refer back to them with a pronoun. Because today's students can expect to hold multiple jobs during their lifetime, studying philosophy allows them, so it gets confirmed later that we are going to be referring to them as they. So the answer to 44 is D. We hope you enjoyed this. Feel free to let us know your thoughts. And that's the end of College Board Test 1, Section 2. Feel free to join us. We're doing these podcasts every weekday at noon Eastern Time. Have a great day.